Okay, North America, welcome to Super Late Night on the Underrated Pod. On tonight's show, we are going to talk about the FS1 shakeup, the new lineup, the lineup where I actually saw the best tweet of the day. The tweet basically said, and I'm going to paraphrase just a little bit, but this new FS1 lineup is actually the cure for insomnia. From underrated.media, I'm Dave DeBaugh, and this is the Underrated Pod.
This is Phoenix.
You've been knocked down and got up again. In a corner, you're surrounded, no defenders.
Okay, North America, welcome to the Super Late Night Sports Show on the Underrated Pod. In fact, we've even got the cool background to actually identify that we are actually recording this super late night. Now, I do want to point out that this shakeup at FS1, of course, is on the heels of Skip Bayless and his $8 million a year contract walking away. I also want to point out, and in the interest of full disclosure, Emmanuel Ocho. I mean, how much coffee does Emmanuel Ocho actually drink a day? I'm just saying, I am going to talk about that on tonight's show. Now, the big question here is this new lineup, does this new FS1 lineup actually look like a lineup that could actually take down ESPN? And I laugh a little bit. I want to know what you think, North America. This is not about me. Please go ahead and drop in your comments. I want to know what you think. Do you think this is a lineup that will cause insomnia? Seriously, North America, go ahead and tell me what you think. I'm going to do my best to be as upfront about these particular news shows as possible. Now, I do want to point out that I think the Fox Sports executives got together and were in Vegas playing some poker, and they started just flipping cards around. They're like, hey, let's take two guys from Speak and give them their own show, and we'll put them in Skip's old spot, but we're not going to call it Speak. We're going to call it The Facility, which, by the way, is a really good name for a show. I will give the team over at FS1 that they are good at naming shows. Now, we're going to dive into each of these shows. I'm going to go as quickly as possible for you. First, let's start with the Breakfast Ball. As I pointed out, also a very good name for a show. Now, there are very few people in North America that actually like Craig Carton. I hate to say it, but that like him. I mean, there's another guy that's actually on a lot of caffeine as well. Now, in terms of Mark Schlereth, I actually really like him. He's very good at telling stories, tends to do a good job, tends to be what you would expect to be from a show like this, willing to take a stance and be controversial, which is generally what makes these shows work. Then there's Danny Parkins, who just left his job in Chicago at the Score there. And Danny Parkins is definitely more of a talk about the sports, ride the line, very cerebral in his thoughts, not as controversial as a Craig Carton or Mark Schlereth. Outside of the name being great, do you think this show is actually going to have better ratings than the last show? Do you think this show can actually, take on Get Up? That is the first question. Now, if we move on to The Facility, which once again is a fantastic name for a show. Now, Emmanuel Ocho, I have tried over and over and over again to actually watch Speak. And generally, I can watch the show once I get past the actual opening of the show. Look, I am just laying my cards out on the table here, North America. And for those of you that have seen Speak, you know what I'm talking about. Look, he's a nice guy, does a good job on the rest of the show. It's just those openings that just flat out kill me. His so much caffeine flowing through his body. It's absolutely ridiculous. Look, James Jones and LaShawn McCoy both do a really nice job. If you haven't seen Chase Daniel at all, he is also very good. Now, I want to point out that this particular show, The Facility, is really an attempt to actually take a little bit of market share away from First Take. Now, that certainly seems to be something that they might be able to accomplish. There is actually a very good strategy here by the team over at FS1. What they're saying is, we know that football is king in North America. We know that talking about football on television, on these kinds of shows, is also king in North America. You just look at First Take's ratings during the first half of the season, and you look at their ratings in the second half of the year. What tends to happen is between October and January, their ratings skyrocket. They go from 400 and 450,000 in June and July to close to 1 million by the end of the year. That is the kind of pull that the National Football League has, and ESPN has been really wise to program to that with First Take in the way they do. So for FS1 to launch a brand new show, which is supposed to go head to head with First Take, this is a good time for them to do it, especially with a football slant. Now, am I saying they're going to be successful? We'll get into that in a little bit. It is certainly an uphill battle for the team over at FS1 on that particular one. Now, look, the Herd is great. Love Colin Cowherd. Love him on radio. Love him on television. Does an absolutely fantastic job. The addition of Jason McIntyre has its moments. I'll leave it at that. The crown jewel of the lineup, of course, if you followed the Underrated, you know that I'm a big fan of First Things First. I think Nick Wright does an absolutely fantastic job. The chemistry on this show is just tremendous with Kevin Wildes and, of course, Chris Broussard. Leaving that show alone, making the decision to not move Nick Wright into that Skip Bayless death trap, which is The Facility, was certainly a wise move by what I'm sure was drunken executives over at FS1 when they put this lineup together. And then finally, we've got Speak. And when you look at Speak, you know, there's Joy Taylor. Look, this is one person I'm not going to comment on. Then you have Keyshawn Johnson and Paul Pierce. I love Keyshawn Johnson. Paul Pierce is okay. It's, you know, a nice lineup. Joy Taylor will do a fine job as the host of this show. I'm sure they'll bring in other people. Expect like Rachel Nichols to show up often, but there'll be other people involved for sure on Speak. The thing about Speak, despite my issues with the opening of the show with Ocho in the past, is that the show's actually doing pretty good. The show's actually gaining momentum. So it's a question of whether or not they can continue to gain momentum. Now, they are not coming anywhere close to beating the shows that ESPN has running during those particular times. PTI is just an absolutely fantastic show, and it has been, and you might be surprised by the ratings of that show, but they are sometimes higher than First Takes ratings, which means they're well over 400,000 for that 30-second or that 30-minute time slot. So Speak certainly has a ways to go before it's at that level, but certainly a show that has stabilized and has continued to grow slightly over the last couple of years. It also leads into probably some real-time sports that are going to happen right after the show's up. So you might get some people to show up 10 minutes before a game actually kicks off, and they'll be tied into that Speak show directly. So those are my initial thoughts on this new lineup. Now, if we go back to the initial question of the night, and it is North America, super late night, I have to say. If we go back to the initial question, which is FS1's bold attempt to take down ESPN. Will it work or will it not work? That is the question, North America. I want to know what your thoughts are. What do you think about these specific lineups? Look, the breakfast ball, great name. I seriously doubt they're going to be able to actually cut into Get Up in any real way, which means the lead-in show to the facility is probably going to be pretty weak, which is certainly one of the issues that Skip Bayless had over the years with the Undisputed. Now, the facility, which, as I pointed out, is a really wise attempt, at least during the first 6 months of its existence, to actually target the National Football League audience. If they can keep Ocho under control, I'm telling you, I am telling you, and they can do a good job of bringing in actual NFL players, NFL coaches, NFL experts. They're people from their actual broadcasts, Tom Brady, etc. The facility actually has a chance. It's not going to beat First Take. It's not going to bite into First Take's market share. But what it might do is carve out some new market share that they didn't have with Skip Bayless. I think this is an extremely wise move by the team over at FS1. Leaving the herd alone, leaving First Things First alone certainly made a lot of sense. Now, having to backfill the Speak cast with 2 additional players and keeping Joy Taylor there certainly makes a lot of sense. I love Keyshawn Johnson on television. I think Keyshawn Johnson's actually one of the most underrated analysts on television. Keyshawn Johnson just needed to be away from Skip Bayless, to be honest. So I think this should be interesting. It will be interesting to see how it works out, how it all plays out. I will also be curious to see if Richard Sherman somehow becomes a regular piece of the Speak show as well. All right, North America, those are my thoughts. What do you think about this lineup? Is it going to cause insomnia? Yes or no? I want to know what you think. All right. Hey, so listen, the Underrated channel, we're actually starting to grow pretty fast. I think we've added 500 subscribers in the last 3 weeks. We've been around for a little while, but really been dedicating a lot of time to the channel over the past month, and things are actually starting to grow. Thank you very much for your support. 1 million plus views in for the Underrated pod. Hey, do check out our audio pod as well. We're all over the place for the I sounded like Trump there for a second. We have audiences. We have huge audiences. So for the Underrated pod, I am Dave DeBaugh. It is super late night. Wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day. To the music we go.
This is Phoenix.